The Drivers' Championship may be done and dusted, but what Verstappen's in Vegas stays in Vegas. But with just 2 race weekends to go, the Constructors' Championship is hotting up. Welcome to the Grid Talk podcast, where we will be previewing the Qatar Grand Prix at Lusail International Circuit in Doha. I'm your host, Tom Horrox, and today I'm joined by Formula Talk host, Sophia Richmond.
Hi.
And before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the most trusted betting platform and number one source for all online betting, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, and NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline. The game starts here. Now, before we start today, I just need to go into a little bit of breaking news, which happened shortly before recording. Formula One have announced that they have agreed an agreement in principle with GM to support their bid for an 11th team in the 2026 season. They have announced that the team will be branded GM Cadillac, and Chris Medland has tweeted that Michael Andretti will be involved as a director. So it seems the Andretti name has been dropped from the title. How big is this news for F1, Sophia? And what do you think got the deal over the line after so much opposition from teams and drivers alike?
I'm so excited. I think the biggest thing also is probably the fans kind of getting involved in kind of conversations, pushing. It's always, well, not always, but recently it's always been 10 constructors and all that. But having an 11th team that's also a historic team in other disciplines, obviously they do endurance, they kind of involved sometimes in IndyCar as well. Like it's going to make it very shaking up with all the other constructors. I'm very excited to see how it's going to go. I think obviously most tracks can, I think, hold up to 26 drivers to an extent anyway. I think pit lane and pit stops will be interesting, especially the ones that have a shorter circuit. But it definitely makes it more challenging and viable as well in the competition. We're going to have two new drivers. Hopefully, they are going to be more rookies, or even have somebody who is a legacy in the sport as well, driving probably for the first year. But I guess, to be fair, like the 180, because back in January, they're like, absolutely not, we don't want them. Like, I don't even know. Maybe because of the hype of Vegas. Obviously, it got dropped today about the GM off the back of how great Vegas was and the racing there, and obviously how big it's starting to get big racing in the States as well in North America. So that might have been one of the last big pushes as well. And interesting about dropping Andretti, because obviously they were the big ones that were speaking about it at the start. They're the ones that had the main conversations and getting involved. Mario Andretti being very vocal online, and Michael Andretti as well being very vocal online about getting the 11th team in. So the fact that it's been announced without the Andretti name is quite an interesting one to see. But hopefully we'll see how it goes, and obviously more news will come out in the next following weeks for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quote from Formula One says, over the course of this year, they've achieved operational milestones and made clear their commitment to brand the 11th team GM Cadillac. I think that's really interesting, the wording there, made clear their commitment to brand the 11th team GM Cadillac. So to just basically saying, nope, we don't want you, Andretti. I think that's. I don't know where this has come from and where this disdain for the Andretti name has come from, because we've got a Formula One world champion with the Andretti name. Yes, okay, potentially Michael Andretti wasn't as successful in the sport, but like you say, it's a global brand. You've got Andretti in Formula E, had him in Extreme E, IndyCar. It's a huge name in motorsport in general. So to just treat it with casual disdain like that, I think is a little bit of a bad rap for Formula One. But I'm dead excited about having an 11th team personally. I cannot wait. I always thought the grid looked a little bit bare with 20. And to be honest, we've had Apex GP at most races this year, so we know we can support an 11th team. So I am all for that. But moving on to the Qatar Grand Prix, it's the third time we've raced here. So we've only raced here on the odd numbered years. So the first time we got an even number, didn't race here in 2022. Obviously, Max Verstappen has won both previous times at this circuit, but his Red Bull car is a very different beast this time around. And now that the championship's sewn up, can you see him taking his foot off the gas, or will he be just as intense as the Max we've seen this season so far?
I think he will still have the foot on the gas. I think because the Constructors' Championship is still into play, obviously you have McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari kind of all fighting. Finishing in where they finish in the Constructors is crucial for the development going into 2025, also going into 2026 as well with the new regs. So I think, especially because of how Checo's performance has not been great as of ever this season, pretty much.
You leave my Checo alone. I would never hear a bad word said about him.
I mean, do you see his performance these last couple of races? I think they need Max to keep the foot on the gas and try to get the crucial points so that they can finish. I hope not first, but again, there's so many points up to play for these last. We got the sprint race and the actual race this weekend coming. We still have the final race in Abu Dhabi. There's, I think, over 100 points still to play, and the constructors are very close to each other in that sense. So I think they're definitely going to push, but I don't think he will take a lot of chances and risky takes. It's just more the consistent. But the thing is that we've seen as well, he's been in all different places of the grid and have finished in points, won races, podium. So I think it's going to be the same as always, whether or not he had won the championship last weekend or not. He now needs to help his actual team get the constructor points to try to finish on the top of the standings.
I think we've had a lot of experience of Max Verstappen winning world championships in the last few years, and he's never once taken his foot off the gas, has he? He's been relentless in pursuit of those race wins. He just loves winning so much, and I think the biggest story would be, is Sergio Perez going to finish within a minute of him, as he's never managed that on this track. But moving on to the Constructors' Championship, despite Max wrapping up the championship with 2 races to go, we move on to the Constructors, which unbelievably doesn't involve Red Bull, really. I know you said they're fighting for it, but 53 points off, that's still with 103 points up for grabs, with this supposedly being a very strong track for McLaren, Ferrari looking strong as well. They are the main protagonists in this battle. And with Ferrari just sitting 24 points off, McLaren had a weak showing in Las Vegas. So should they be worried about the threat from Ferrari, given how consistent that car is now?
I would think so. Like I said, all three have been doing consistent. They have, both drivers have won more than one races, well, minus Perez, sorry. But for McLaren and Ferrari, they both have race wins as well. So I think it definitely is coming up to play. Coming in towards the end of the season as well, though, we can see that there might be some penalties coming in because obviously damages. If we actually look back to even last year with the sprint race and the race in Qatar, we had obviously Carlos DNF, which obviously lost out for a fuel leak, which was actually crucial points needed for constructors. So hopefully that doesn't repeat again. But I mean, it's looking like it is McLaren's constructors to lose now. It's more who's going to finish second and third in what order. Also, again, as mentioned, that determines as well what's happening with the development and win times and everything. I think Ferrari can catch up because they have both drivers in play to get good points. Again, I'm so sorry, I'm slating Perez so much, but how he's done this season, it's very clear, it's obvious. But I think Ferrari can probably pull ahead over the Red Bull in the constructors. So we'll see. But definitely it is McLaren's Constructors' Championship to lose, which is a great feat to have as well, because we've not had McLaren have win the Constructors in so long. It's been only Mercedes and Red Bull kind of dominant. So it's nice to have a new team into play going into the new era of F1 as well in the next couple of years.
Yep, 1998, their last championship. I know, I was watching every race live that year.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah, okay, all right. Okay, be quiet.
26 years.
Yeah, that's how long it's been. I was watching that season passionately. I did a tour of the Woking based factory then. It wasn't MTC. I did a tour of the McLaren factory that year, and they were leading the Constructors' Championship, and all was right with the world. But that was the last time they won the Constructors' Championship. So
it's a great year.
Yes. Great, exactly. So it's I'm very, very excited to see them, hopefully, from my perspective, close this out. But like you say, it's definitely theirs to lose. I think if Ferrari only closed 12 points on McLaren, which is exactly what they need to do every race weekend. However, I just think that in Qatar, it's going to be much more suited to that car. So all they've got to do is match Ferrari in Qatar, and then it should be plain sailing in Abu Dhabi. So, but you never know. It's the end of the season, parts are tired, engines are worn out. There's anything could happen at any time. So I'm not counting those chickens. They're staying very well locked in their coop at the moment. So Mercedes will finish fourth in the Constructors' Championship, no matter what happens now. But after their dominant performance in Vegas, can you see their form continuing? And with Hamilton desperate to end on a high, will he be able to close out that 9-point gap to George Russell?
For sure. I mean, it is a track that they've done quite well. I'm looking at the results even last year. Sprint race, they finished fourth and fifth, and then in the actual race, George finished fourth. Hamilton had the collision with, I believe it was with George, which resulted. So that's another kind of teammate battle definitely to discuss as well. So I mean, they are getting consistent enough to finish quite high up in the race classification. So I think Lewis is definitely going to push, especially after all the comments that were made leading up to Las Vegas as well, saying just being on the fence and everyone saying like he's so done, he's ready to move to Ferrari. I think he definitely wants to do one last push to say like, while I am leaving, Mercedes has been my team for years. I've done so much with them. I've won championships, races, everything. I'm not going to leave him in a high and dry kind of situation. He's going to push as much as he can. Um, Again, it doesn't really make that much in the constructors, as you mentioned, because they're kind of fixed into fourth because there's so much of a gap. But I think it will be very close. Who knows? It might be they tie in points going into Abu Dhabi, and it might be another 2021 between the teammates. But I think it is possible that Lewis can maybe get, maybe not the race win, but who knows? Maybe the sprint win might be actually a possibility for him this weekend coming.
Yeah, it's one of the few tracks on the calendar that he has never won because it's only really come up in a couple of times, obviously. So it would be nice to tick that box before he goes from that side as well. It's really interesting teammate battle brewing there. Obviously not brewing. It's coming to the end of a 3-year spell, but a really interesting teammate dynamic as well there. George really setting the stall out now and showing that he is a world-class driver. But another teammate battle we saw at the weekend actually was with the Ferraris, and again also talking about the McLarens and their two drivers. There's four very very strong drivers there. Very interesting dynamics when you've got between Norris and Piastri, the young charger, and then the current hot shot. And then with Charles Leclerc being the chosen one and Carlos Sainz very much upsetting the apple cart a little bit, being very much better than I think Ferrari gave him credit for. And he's always been a close match to Leclerc. When things are not going well, Sainz seems to have the upper hand. And when things are great, Leclerc just has the extra turn of speed. So given that Piastri won the sprint here last year and beat Lando in the Grand Prix and Sainz's recent form, can you see the gloves coming off this weekend, especially with Sainz on his way out of the team? Is this going to be a four-way fight for the win? What's going to happen this weekend with these guys?
One thing with Carlos Sainz is the minute that there's pressure on him, he performs and even outperforms. We've seen it when he was in McLaren. We've seen him in other teams as well. So that is how he is. Obviously, he is still racing next season. He has his spot and everything. But I think it's more kind of, a lot of people kind of put him to the side because he wasn't the golden child of Ferrari. That's always been Charles Leclerc for years. So I think he's just trying to push and be more like, I am a good driver. This shouldn't be a 1 and 2. There's always going to be a 1 and 2 in teams, let's be honest. But I should be the number one, not Charles. And his performance has been doing well. But again, they both have won 2 races each. But I think consistently as well, Carlos has been doing a bit better than Charles. There's been some interesting calls on both sides with strategy as well. But that's Ferrari in general. But I think with the 4 looking also with McLaren as well, it's a 4-way battle. And it's quite fun because the things that they've all been like slightly teammates as well. You got Piastri and Charles in junior series as well, and then obviously Carlos and Carlando as well. So it's quite a fun one to see. So I think now because the championship is over, and yes, it's still fighting for the constructors as well, but because the championship is over, they're going to be gloves off. I want more race wins. I want more points. So I think, and then you have Max in the contention as well. But out of the 4, I would say probably, I hate to say, but Piastri and Carlos are my 2 that I would back from either the McLaren or the Ferrari team, just because of the consistency and looking at previous records as well. As you mentioned, obviously Piastri winning the sprint. He's one of the few drivers as well as Carlos to win a sprint. It is quite statistically more likely that one of those 2 would win over their teammates. So those are my 2 in that perspective. But I'm excited. It'll go into 5-way if you add even 7-way as well. If you add the 2 Mercedes and Max, that's pretty much almost all the points positions as well of the grid. But I'm excited to see. So definitely with the sprint race coming in, still an unknown track as well for some of these drivers as well. A lot can play up. Obviously, we saw last year how health and safety was a big issue as well, with people passing out with the heat and being ill. Obviously, Logan retired because he was too ill to continue. I don't expect that to happen to Franco because he's used to the heat in that kind of sense. But that's also another factor we need to kind of consider as well going into this weekend, is how external factors like weather is going to take place in the race as well.
Yeah, I've heard it's like the Arctic in Florida where Sargent comes from. So yeah, absolutely point taken. But also there is, I did have a quick look at the weather forecast, and it's looking almost coat weather in Qatar. We're looking at temperatures under 30 degrees Celsius. So that's a lot. It's a lot cooler than last year. Was it 45 degrees or something that hit last year or something ridiculous? I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it's looking like it's about 10 to 15 degrees. Cooler than last year. So, and plus they've got, I think there were some regulatory changes where to allow extra ventilation in the cockpit and stuff. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't have the issues that we had last year. Although at the end of the race, Lewis Hamilton hadn't broken a sweat out, but that's because he retired on the first corner. So looking ahead then. So if you enjoyed this podcast, we would love it if you give us a 5-star review. We love doing this. We're a fan podcast, and we're just having fun and entertaining you guys. So if you could leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, we would really appreciate that. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and subscribe so you know when we're going live. You can join us in the live show chats and get involved in the show. But a little self promotion out the way. We're going to move on to the second half of the grid with Haas. And they've shown some great form of late, scoring in 5-point finishes out of the last 6 races. Just the rain in Brazil that kind of really threw them. Car's not great in the rain, but they have jumped back ahead of Alpine in Vegas after Alpine's collapse. They lead that fight for 6th place in the championship by a single point, but they have never scored in Qatar. And both their drivers are fairly inexperienced in this track as well. For drivers that are very experienced, they've only raced here once each. So can you see Haas changing their fortunes at this track this weekend, and who will come out on top in those 2 drivers?
I mean, yeah, no, I'm not expecting anything really from Haas. Looking at our previous results when last season as well, finished 13th and retired for sprint race, and then in the actual race as well, it was 14th and 16th as well, which is kind of the average of Haas. You have those little moments where they just come out of the blue, like what happened in Vegas, and score points as well. You can say that about Alpine as well, let's be honest. But yeah, I'm not expecting points for either of the drivers. One thing that's been interesting is how they've been doing well in qualifying as well. So I think that also might come into a bit of a play as well. It depends on how well they do. I think definitely one of them will go into Q3. I'm probably going to say it's going to be Kevin, maybe over Nico. But again, definitely both into Q2, I think is probably possible for them, for both sprints and also for the race this weekend. But out of the 2, I'm going to say Kevin's going to finish higher than Nico, especially because like this is the penultimate race weekend for Kevin in F1 as well. So I guess he wants to finish with a higher higher level, go out with bang. He has no driver's points, penalty points now, so he can do whatever he wants. But yeah, my money's on Kevin over Nico. But again, I don't see points for either of the drivers this weekend.
Oh, no, I think Haas might have a chance to sneak in some points in this one. It might be a race of attrition. End of the season, things get a little bit too hot, and the Haas doesn't go fast enough to overheat. So, no, it's a decent car this year. To be fair to Haas, and they've operationally been a lot sharper. But the team that definitely were not operationally sharp this weekend were Alpine. They had their day of days in Brazil. Double podium, but that quickly turned into a nightmare in Vegas with a technical failure for Gasly, even though his team said there was nothing wrong. And then a box opposite for a call to Ocon, and then he comes into the pit lane and there's nobody there. So the car does look quick, though. It does look like the quickest car in that fight for 6th. So they do tend to run well here as well. They had a podium here in 2021 and decent points in 23. So can they take the fight to the best of the rest in that amazing fight that everyone cares about?
Yeah, I mean, out of them, Alpine probably has the strongest suit for both of the drivers to do well. As you mentioned, obviously podiums and points, and even the sprint race, Pierre was just off from getting points. And then obviously I believe Ocon finished P7 as well. So it is definitely possible for Alpine to actually do quite well. I think, like I said, they're going to be the more consistent one going in. Again, it goes back into qualifying. Their qualifying has been absolutely horrendous though as well. So this is where if they can get the qualifying back in check for both qualifyings, then they can actually do very well coming into this weekend. So a lot will ride on that. And again, as well, it is slightly a newer track for some of these drivers. There's only one free practice as well, so that's also going to come into play as well, how the setup will be for the cars. If there's any issues or damage or any kind of problems in that free practice, will have an immediate knock-on effect for the rest of the weekend as well. So that's also something to kind of look out for. But out of the two, though, I would say Alcon would have probably better, maybe redemption from last weekend. But I think out of the two, Alcon probably has a more stronger face to go the distance and get the points needed or finish higher than Gasly for this weekend coming.
Okay, they are very close in the championship as well. It's just what's it? Just checking now. Yeah, just 3 points. 3 points. Yeah, 23 to 26. So just a 3 point separating those two. Um, they seemed like they genuinely got on in Brazil when they were both on the podium, and maybe they buried the hatchet from what happened, which no one seems to know what happened, but there's definitely some really bad blood from the past there. So they seem to be getting on finally in this swan song of their time as teammates, and Ocon gets to say, "Hey, I'm leaving you. I'm leaving this team now. I get to get out of this dumpster fire of a team." And Gasly's like, "Yeah, I beat you, so yeah, off you go." But it's going to be a bit of a grudge match for the last couple of races, I think. And there's if in the last race, there's their position in the championship is secure, and it's a fight between them for position. I think there could well be fireworks in Abu Dhabi or indeed Qatar if they're close together on track. But looking at the bottom three teams, we haven't spoken about Aston Martin today, and we're not going to because they're incredibly unremarkable at the moment and don't seem to be doing an awful lot at the moment. But the bottom three teams there, RB are in eighth, but one good result, they could jump all the way up to sixth. And Williams, they've literally taken pieces of their car out of the bin to try and put them back on the car. There's a big crate at Grove with all the broken bits of the car on, and they're just trying to strap the car together to get it to the end of the season. And Sauber have finally got some decent upgrades on their car, which came online for the last race, which did seem to help. So, which of those three teams can you see sneaking into in the points, if any? And Sauber gonna get a point? Are they gonna break the duck by the end of the season?
God, I hope so. That would be absolutely embarrassing for them not to have, especially for both of the drivers on their way out of F1 as well. Looking back though, last year they both finished in the points P8 and P9. However, something we haven't mentioned is the amount of track limits that came into play, which had a lot of penalties, multiple 5 seconds. We had a 10-second penalties. So again, that's also another thing that come into play that could benefit Sauber, which is what happened in the race last year as well. So it is possible. I mean, it's leading up to my bold prediction is that they're going to get a point. One of the drivers is going to get a point this weekend. I think if they don't get any points this season, I think the last time was in 2021 that a constructor didn't get any points. So I need to double check the data for that. But it is quite to go from how they were last season to obviously this season and not performing well, always out in Q1, and not securing any points so far this season. Then you had Franco come in and then score points straight away and outperforming. So hopefully it is for Sauber to get some needed points. I think Williams could have an opportunity, but again, it depends on how, luckily it's only one free practice, so hopefully there won't be any damages. The Christmas bonus should be very, very nice for the amount of hours overtime working. I think every single session has had, since Brazil, has had one car has suffered damage, which is wild to think, and especially for a constructor team which is very small and funding is very limited as well. That's not what you need for a team. Like Red Bull would have been fine with it, it's okay, but that also would not happen as well, both from the car setup and obviously the driver standards as well. But yeah, Red Bull, Visa, Cash App, Racing Bulls, possible as well. They had points last season with Yuki. I think Liam Lawson knows this track a bit, looking at Formula 2 as well. So he has some knowledge, but not so much knowledge in the F1 car for it. But I think out of the three, I will say probably Sauber or maybe Alex Albon will do a miracle and get some points. I don't see Franco. Franco doesn't know the track as well compared to the other drivers as well. I think he's only done it once in his career, and that was in Formula 2 as well, because they don't race in Formula 3. So it is very much a new track for him. So hopefully with the single practice that there won't be any misdriving and any damages sustained to the car, because I don't know how long these engineers can do with every single session having issues. So, but yeah, Sauber, then Williams, then Racing, Visa Cash App.
Yeah. decarb. Yeah, I hasten to agree. I would actually really love to see either Bottas or Zhou grab a point either this weekend or next weekend, just to go out on a high and prove that they've still got it. Bottas especially, Zhou, like, great. He's been a decent driver, but Bottas has got a real legacy in the sport, and I'd hate to see him just go out of a whimper in a 0 point season after performing quite well. Actually, I think this season, I think he's had a pretty good season, but just that car has just been. It started off just not being able to have a pit stop, and I think they lost some potential points early doors with their pit stop issues, and then just never really recovered from that. The pace went away, and well, didn't even have the pace, but the little pace they had went away, and yes, it's just not been a good season for them in that sense. So I'd love to see them do that. But I'm loving that definitely comes under the bold prediction there, which we're going to move on to predictions now. So we're going to do pole position, sprint win, full podium, and then a bold prediction just for funsies as well. So you've already touched on potentially what your bold predictions are here, but obviously you can change that if you want to. What's your predictions then for this weekend?
So my poll, I think it will be Max Verstappen. He's done very well. Obviously, he had pole last year as well, and they need the points in the constructors as well. In the sprint race, I will say randomly Lando, just for fun, a new sprint race winner will be nice to have in the collection. And then my podium for the actual race, I think Max will convert it to pole because it is very much a track that is doable to do it. I think in P2 will be Lando, and then P3, let's go Carlos, which again is also kind of different from what I said about Piastri couldn't be better than Lando, but anything could happen. My bold, I am still sticking with this. This is my bold I've been using almost every time I'm on Grid Talk, is that the drivers with 0 points will get points. So at the moment, mine is Logan Sargent, obviously. It's the two Salbas. So hopefully one of those drivers will get a point of some sort. They have 2 opportunities to do it. So actually, technically 3 if you include obviously qualifyings. So anything's possible, but I'm hoping that Zhou or Bottas will get at least a point this weekend.
Long-term listeners of Grid Talk will know what happens when hosts bet on fan favourites to get points for the first time ever. And there's George Houseman betting that George Russell would get points every race for about 2 years, and it just never came along. And then when he stopped doing it, he finally got the points. So that's the kiss of death right there. So I think all my predictions are different to yours, which normally I'm cursing because my predictions are taken. I like to show a little bit of divergence, but I'm going to go for Grand Prix pole, first time ever. Oscar Piastri sticks it on pole. I think this is going to be a solid track for McLaren, and he's shown that he knows this track very well. He's very good around this place, and he's beaten Norris here in the Grand Prix before as well. Verstappen was mighty quick here last year. I don't think Red Bull are going to be there this year. I think it's going to be McLaren domination this weekend, certainly for pace. Whether they can operationally make that work, I don't know. But Piastri for pole position, sprint win. I'm going to go with Lando Norris, just because I just think that he'll probably end up with sprint pole and then get the race the sprint win as well. In fact, I think you said Norris the sprint win, didn't you? So okay, that's not the same. And then my podium, I'm going to go for Norris for the win because I'm massively biased like that. And yep, exactly. Yeah, I just in the chat that you said about convert pole to win. Yes, I'm going to say he's going to do it. He might not lead at the end of the first lap, but he's going to do it. Verstappen second, with Piastri rounding out the podium in third. And my bold prediction, despite me shunning them earlier, Aston Martin are quick with both cars. That's going to be my prediction. Hopefully Stroll will get to the end of the formation lap this time.
I was about to say, define quick. Points or just be quick?
Well, yeah, exactly. They're quick, but it might be until the end of the formation lap. Who knows? So that is our show for you. But before we go, I would just like to give opportunity for promotion. So, Sophia, would you like to tell us a little bit about Formula Talk?
Yeah. So pretty much we cover, myself and Tom Downing, special guest, we cover everything that's not F1, so Formula 2, Formula 3, F1 Academy. Unfortunately, we have taken a bit of a break due to life getting in the way, but we will be hopefully coming back towards the end of the season to do some reviews. Obviously, there's been new announcements about F1 Academy. That's just come out to press. We have new drivers being announced in F1 Academy, F2, and F3. You can also find me doing small video articles for F1 Chronicle, again, covering Formula 2, Formula 3, and F1 Academy. You can find that on MSN or on all social media platforms. As well, I do sometimes cover articles for everything F1. Once again, covering F2, F3, and F1 Academy as well. And you can find that on everythingf1.com.
You're a lot busier than I am.
I'm getting back into it though.
Yeah.
I've taken a little bit of a hiatus for the last 2 to 3 months just for personal reasons. So I'm getting back into it for the last bit of the season and then prepping for the new season for sure.
Yeah, it always gets to around this time of the year, and then I get very busy. And my other podcast, The Monkey Seat, myself and Carl, we normally around Austin, it gets to the point where like, right, when are we going to record? We're not going to be able to this week, are we? So and that's what's happened. The last 2 weeks, we haven't done a race review from Mexico or Brazil. We'd managed to get one in after Austin, but we promise we're going to be recording this week. Hopefully, it may even be out before you hear this one. So look at The Monkey Seat, just search for it wherever you find podcasts, and you'll find it. But yeah, if you want an uncut version of Grid Talk with slightly less informed opinions, that's myself and Carl. So Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews, reviews, reactions, qualifying results, race results, all that kind of stuff. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting on Patreon. And if you want to support the show further, why not sign up for Patreon for exclusive content? We've got our patron-only podcast, which has got one episode out, second episode planned. So that's a new thing that's behind a nice paywall for you. So get along and help support us or everything that we get from Patreon and from monetization does go back into the show. So thank you again for our ad revenue as well that we're getting. That's all going back towards the show as well. So make sure you subscribe so you're first to know whenever we go live and whenever there's a new episode released. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast presented by Better Line, and goodbye.